This is episode 365 of That Shakespeare Life. Just like the work of William Shakespeare, That Shakespeare Life is powered by our patrons. Listeners just like you can access bonus history content related to our episodes along with special extras. Learn more and sign up today at patreon.com/That Shakespeare Life and stay tuned after the episode for even more details.
Hi, I'm David Shazier, author of the Shakespeare Solved series of historical novels. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend Cassidy Cash.
What's really nice, though, is that we have this building that's still there, that still exists, that's this kind of window onto that moment. And it's a really lovely moment because it's when she would have had a little child and therefore would have been William Shakespeare's granddaughter, Elizabeth. And so it's the house that if William wanted to be a granddad and go and visit, this would have been it. So it's really quite fun for Shakespeare
Welcome
fans
to That Shakespeare
imagine.
Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
This week, we have a special opportunity here on the show to explore the historic home of Shakespeare's eldest daughter, Susanna Shakespeare Hall, that has been brought to life in a beautiful digital 3D format thanks to a pioneering new digital archive that has created an augmented reality exhibition that lets visitors like you and me visit and virtually walk around in Susanna's home known as Hall's Croft. You can do this from anywhere in the world. The 3D component allows users to bring 17th century early modern objects into their own spaces using the AR feature, while the digital archive allows users to explore 3 separate rooms from Hall's Croft from the comfort of their very own homes. This week, we're delighted to welcome Ailsa Grant Ferguson, the lead on this digital project, back to That Shakespeare Life to tell us about the research that went into this program, what they learned about Hall's Croft and about Susanna Shakespeare through their research. She'll share details on how you can explore this 3D model for yourself. Ailsa Grant Ferguson is principal lecturer at the University of Brighton, and she is currently holder of an AHRC RDE fellowship and an elected fellow of the Royal Historical Society. Her current research focuses on the life, afterlives, biographies, and presentations of Susanna Shakespeare Hall, which is Anne and William Shakespeare's eldest daughter. She's working on her next book, The 7 Ages of Susanna Shakespeare, and as the principal investigator for a major research project in collaboration with the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, focusing on Shakespeare's daughter, Susanna, and her home, Hall's Croft, Ailsa led the team that created a 3D model of Hall's Croft using AI technology that allows visitors to walk through an interactive display of the property from anywhere in the world. She joins us today to tell us about this project and more about Susanna Shakespeare. Find out more about Ailsa in this project in the show notes for today's episode. Hello, Ailsa. Welcome to That Shakespeare Life.
Hi, Cassidy. It's so lovely to be back.
Set the stage for us here a little bit for those that may be new to Hall's Croft. Tell us about when it was built and how did Susanna Shakespeare come to live there?
Okay, so Hall's Croft goes back a little way. So there's some documentary evidence here and there, but as with all old houses, they're heavily kind of built onto and things like that. What we do know, though, is that John and Susanna would have been looking to move in around 1613, and they only would have lived there about 3 years because in 1616, as many of your listeners will be very aware, Susanna lost her father, William Shakespeare, and inherited New Place, the largest house in Stratford. And so the likelihood is that pretty quickly she and her husband and her daughter would have moved over there. So we're looking at quite a small window of time. We don't have documentary evidence that she lived there. We do know that she lived in Old Town, and this is the right place and the right size of house. And so we can be reasonably happy with that, but she wouldn't have lived there a super long time. What's really nice, though, is that we have this building that's still there, that still exists, that's this kind of window onto that moment. And it's a really lovely moment because it's when she would have had a little child and therefore would have been William Shakespeare's granddaughter, Elizabeth. And so it's the house that if William wanted to be a granddad and go and visit, this would have been it. So it's really quite fun for Shakespeare fans to imagine.
Of all the buildings related to Shakespeare, why did you choose Hall's Croft specifically for creating this archive and 3D model?
Okay, that is a lovely question. I love that question because the reason is Susanna. So what was really interesting and what kicked this off is, I'd done lots of work with the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust before. They do all sorts of amazing work to kind of preserve and present these houses, these homes and spaces related to Shakespeare's life. Hall's Croft had always been one of those that's a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of an outlier, because it is not kind of where New Place was. It's not the birthplace, but it's right in the middle of town. So it's just asking to be visited and looked at and enjoyed. But for me, it's Susanna herself. That is this kind of figure that is probably underrepresented. She pops up, she pops out from behind her husband or her father, and we weren't really seeing her. And so I was really interested in creating a project where we could really start trying to look directly at her. And what better way to try and make friends with Susanna is by visiting her home and looking at how she might have lived.
So tell us about the technical process of creating a 3D model of a historic property. What goes into creating this kind of model, and what kind of technology did you use?
Well, Cassidy, I've got to be honest, I'm a literary historian. So what I did is I found the best people to explain this to me. Basically, my kind of ideal in my head was that we would create a space that people could explore, and that the documents and the objects would be kind of virtually there for people to find. And in order to make that happen, I worked with an incredible company called Arcade, who've just expanded into One Up. And they had made the most very extraordinary and innovative augmented reality items and exhibitions. And they work really on things that are kind of for learning and playfulness. They're not games, but they are a playful approach to learning. And they explained to me the options for how we could do this. And what fascinated me was what we went for, which was 3-dimensional photography. So they have specialist equipment, a specialist camera, where we literally were in there. We were in Hall's Croft. They were taking these images of the room, which are completely 3-dimensional. It's incredible. So they're taking almost all around themselves. And then they go away and they create, separately to this, a kind of virtual model of that space. And then the images kind of stick to the inside. If you imagine having a diorama, if anyone's made a diorama for school and they've taken a box, maybe for some shoes, and they've stuck things all to the inside so that it looks like a room. This is what the technology can now create in a virtual space, so that you are seeing the actual images, but in their right positions. Instead of being flattened out, you're seeing it. So it looked like magic to me, Cassidy, because, incredible. The objects, though, even more, I think, incredible. And that is that there is a team of highly skilled artists, digital artists, who can take a real object, take the precise measurements and shape of that object down to the tiniest detail, and create a clone of that in the virtual space, so that you can actually feel like you're picking that object up and putting it in your home. And that is a process where, it starts off from what looks like a kind of a blank dummy, right the way up to the tiniest bit of a texture on a jar or the pages on a book, and recreate that object in a space that you can access. So it's really incredible to watch these guys at work, but I really couldn't claim to sit down at how they sit down at the computer and do that is part of their magic.
Definitely sounds like magic to me. But I wonder about the 3D model. Now, you focused on 3 rooms of Hall's Croft. Yeah. Tell us about which rooms did you select and how did you pick these 3?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Hall's Croft, for those listeners that are not super familiar with it, it's not a huge house, okay? It's not a big kind of ostentatious house. It's a townhouse with a series of rooms, some of which would not have been there when Susanna lived there. So obviously our main focus was, right, okay, let's think about what the space would have been when she was there, what it would have looked like and how it might have been used. and how it's been presented over time. Because obviously we are photographing what's there, right? So we want these spaces that are most likely to give us a feeling of domestic life in that period in the early 17th century. So we chose the parlor, which is a key room. It's where people might be received. It's where, food might have been consumed. It's where there's a great big fire, that people might gather round. So it was a no-brainer really to say, let's start people off in this room of gathering and a room of busy kind of multi-purpose. The other two rooms we selected was one that's known as the dispensary. Obviously, it's all, the way that it's been presented over time. It's gone through a lot of guises. And so what we wanted to project was this idea of the house as a working space, a space where medicines might have been made because Susanna's husband was a physician. And it's highly likely that Susanna also would have been involved in that process. There's a lot of precedent that shows us that the wives of physicians in that period would have been involved. So we created this idea of a space that would have drug jars to store, and it would be drying herbs on the wall, and it would be somewhere that a pestle and mortar on the side, ready to be used. The third room represents the domestic space in the private space, if you like. So it's an upstairs room, which we've imagined to have a crib in there. It would have been much more crowded, maybe would have had a bed in there. But we've created this space of what might have been a private space. We've got the kind of public, we've got the working, and we've got the private. We also wanted to cover a few really key themes that the research had explored, which is around the use of the plants in the garden, which was around medicine, around Susanna herself and her life and the documentary evidence of her life and various themes. And those are traced through those rooms as well.
Are there plans to digitize the rest of the space or even to create similar models of other historic properties in the area?
This is a really good question because, at the moment, Hall's Croft, actually, this coincides with an incredible new project to preserve and conserve and repair Hall's Croft. So at the moment, it's not accessible. This is the only way you can access it at the moment. I would say, this project was funded by a grant from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, which is part of the UK research funding that we can access. So it was only thanks to that grant that we were able to create this. I actually think it's an incredible model of good practice of inviting people into spaces, into archives, into collections, and saying, hey, you just come in and do what you want to do with this space and explore it. So I would like to see it be a model for further thought, not just around Shakespeare's properties, but hopefully other properties beyond that can allow people more access, not just to the spaces, but to the background research that goes into them.
It certainly feels like a great tool for preservation on the whole, because the ideal is that you are going to be able to preserve the physical property for future generations to come and be a part of. But if a disaster were to happen and the property was destroyed, these kinds of models make it possible for the space to continue on in the face of that, which I feel like is a great option for preservation on the whole.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And we have seen, heaven forbid that's ever necessary, but we have seen certainly in the UK over the years, a couple of great fires at heritage properties, which is just absolutely terrifying and terrible. And I suppose any way that you can preserve a space is good. That it can't be a bad thing. I think that with digital spaces, obviously the digital moves forward, and what we've tried to do is create something that will be constantly added to. So this was always created. It was always part of the discussion with Arcade, as they who were creating this, that this would be something. So, for example, when you go in there, you'll see a door that takes you into out of the parlor into a sort of Hall Croft archive, which we are beginning to populate. So over time, it will get more and more in there. So it's also about not just preserving what's there, but building. So I will be, for example, creating an archive of my own project and the people involved in that. And then that will go into there. So there's this kind of layering of preservation, but also kind of building and kind of looking to the future as well as the past. And how do we want people to be able to access historic spaces, heritage spaces, feel part of it, feel like it belongs to everyone. So, I think it's part of a bigger conversation about the future and how we make sure people feel invited and welcome and find accessible spaces.
As you're putting together a project like this, when you're obviously doing a lot of digging through the archives and looking through documentary evidence, as you've mentioned, and I wonder if there's anything new or surprising that you learned about the life of Susanna Shakespeare, or perhaps about the property there at Hall's Croft when you were putting together the model.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the big question. And actually, interestingly enough, when I started the project and I was, bidding for all the funding and I was pulling the team together, the one thing that I had to warn people is when you're dealing with the life of Shakespeare and his family, the idea that you're going to say, find a document or find an item that hasn't been found already is pretty slim, because of the fact that that stuff has been rummaged through over, a couple of centuries, really, in many cases. What I would say, though, is that we have, what my interest in is to take those items and say, have we read them in every way they can be read? And have we in fact only explored the items relating to Susanna from the point of view of just wanting to find something out about Shakespeare and then casting them aside a little bit? And so I'd say the example I would give is Susanna's epitaph, which I'm very, very interested in and has really informed my kind of concept of what kind of woman she might have been. And the more that I have dug into that epitaph, that poem on her gravestone, which is a reproduction gravestone added, a couple of hundred years ago, based on, thank goodness, William Dugdale, the antiquarian who wrote down what he saw in the 17th century, wrote down her inscription. So it's more that I found out a lot of things about that inscription that just haven't been looked into, things that it quotes, things that it seems to refer to. So, I mean, the research is ongoing, but I would say it's more about finding new things about the items that have perhaps been overlooked, rather than finding new documents or whatever relating to Susanna, if that makes sense, which I find equally interesting and exciting personally.
I think it's a great perspective to say, have we asked all the questions about this that there are to ask? It's always a good thing to say, do we know what we think we know? I think that's a wonderful research perspective. Now, what about the objects in Susanna's cabinet? And there's a focus on 17th century objects here, but tell us about some of the objects that you selected for Susanna's cabinet, and then explain for us this augmented reality, because some of us are new to the whole idea, I think, of the augmented portion of this project, and explain for us what that means we can do with the objects you have available in this cabinet.
Okay, so I'm super excited about this because at the outset, it wasn't even clear what was going to be possible. And it's sort of gone beyond my wildest dreams of what we could achieve with this. But basically, so to kind of take the objects first of all and why they're there. So the objects that you can explore in the cabinet, and they're also dotted around the archive, are relating to these sort of research themes that we felt were really key to understanding Susanna and her world. And it's particularly, it's very interesting as a piece of work on women's history, because this overlays with your previous comment where you said, oh, have we asked all the questions? No, not if it's relating to women's history. We definitely haven't asked all the questions. When we've looked at Susanna, we've said, well, what can this tell us about her father? That's the question that we have asked. These objects are objects that have been collected in the huge collection of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust of early modern objects, art and documents, and they're objects relating to daily life of someone of middling sort, what we call middling sort, sort of a bit like we use middle class, but it's not quite the same. But somebody like Susanna, who they would have owned some books, they would have owned some beautiful objects, they would have owned some things like that, and we were thinking, right, well, what would they be using? So you've got a physician and his wife. So they're going to be using drug jars to store things. They're going to be using a pestle and mortar to create their concoctions and medicines. They're going to be using pieces of medical equipment. they're going to also, have a book that they might be consulting on that. They're going to have, and so we were thinking about Susanna from that perspective of, she gets up in the morning, what does she do? And then we wanted to as well display some of the documentary evidence we do have on Susanna. So there are legal documents in there that you can link out to and take a look at how we think we know things about her. So in terms of the augmented reality, that's taking it a step further. So instead of just telling people, well, we've got all these objects and we're just going to pick one and we're just going to show you a picture of it. And that's it. Instead, there are different directions you can go with that. One is a research direction. You can click on the collection button and you can see all the other related objects in a curated search. But you might also want to say, no, I just want to make a connection with this object. I want to imagine what it would have been like to use it and to see it in the home and to be with the object. And so what you can do with augmented reality is when your listeners want to have a look, which I hope they will look through, there's a little button, and then on the YouTube, we've taken you through how you do this. There's a little button and you'll be given a QR code. So this archive works best on a desktop. And in your hand, you'll have your trusty smartphone or tablet. And you hold that up for a few seconds to that code. And then the most incredible thing happens. And you'll turn your phone round and you will see that object on your desk or in your bedroom. Or maybe you want to hang the herbs up to dry above your stove. You can hold your phone up, and if you look through it, you will see those herbs hanging, or you'll see the drug jar next to your lotions and potions at bedtime as you put your moisturizer on. So the idea is to say, okay, well, let's make a relationship with those objects. And in that way, make a relationship with Susanna, make a relationship with women in the past who are using them. And with perhaps you're somebody who's interested in medicine and you want to make a relationship with past doctors and apothecaries, and maybe you're interested in that. So that's the two-part answer really, is we chose those things. And then we wanted to give people different ways to create a relationship with them. And that's what the augmented reality can achieve in a really new way for heritage presentation.
It's a really thrilling way to be able to literally bring a piece of the 17th century right into your home and experience that history for yourself. And I know we're all super excited about this project and can't wait to get started. So tell us, where can we go to explore this for ourselves?
Great. You can go directly there's a website, it's quite long for me to read out and you won't have your pen ready, but it should be available in the show notes. And you can click straight on the website. There is no paywall. There is no data access. There's no money, anything like that. You can literally just head on into Hall's Croft through there. If you want to then have a go at the cabinet itself, you can open the cabinet in Susanna's parlour and look at all the objects inside there. There's also, what I've also provided is a website to the whole project. So you may remember, if you're listeners that have heard me before, long ago, a few years ago, talking about the garden that we were going to plant. If you go to the whole project website, you'll see that not only are there these digital experiences, but there's also a garden that we have planted, a wellbeing garden using the plants that would have been used for women's health in that period, plants that were used by John Hall, but also in receipt books, recipe books for that women would have passed to each other. And we planted that garden, and there's a video that will, hopefully, it's just a silent video where you can just sit and commune in that garden. There's a soundscape created by the incredible composer Ian Chambers, which I conceived as a way for people to just relax and immerse themselves in the kind of things that Susanna might have been reading, that she might have been experiencing. And Susanna's mind, if you like, is played by Lucy Phelps, the brilliant Shakespearean actress. So you can experience that as well. So if you go to that main project webpage, it'll tell you all about our project and have links to all of those things, which are all free for you to access.
I am just so excited to hear about the garden space. I don't always get the follow-up from guests to find out if their vision had come to life. And so it's really exciting to know that the project you'd been sharing with us, it did actually come to fruition and is not only there, but something that we can celebrate from here and be able to look at and explore. We will place links to all of these resources in the show notes today. So if you want to navigate there and click the links to go directly to the model and start exploring Hall's Croft, you can find that in the show notes, where I will also place the text for Susanna Shakespeare's epitaph if you'd like to learn more about that. And you can also see Ailsa's research into Susanna herself and all the things that we've been talking about today. So stay tuned for the URL for this week's episode where you can explore all of these resources. Now, Ailsa, as you may remember from your last visit with us on That Shakespeare Life, we ask everyone this next question, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible, so your choice would be in addition to those.
Okay, so last time I think I asked for the complete Jane Austen as one book, and you let me have it. So if I weren't to have that, I think I'd have a collection of early modern women's poetry. Am I allowed a collection of poetry?
I think so, yes.
By the great sort of Mary Roth and Amelia Lanier. I think I'd want those ladies with me on the desert island. I think if I've got Shakespeare, I think I need his sisters, right?
I think so. That would only be fitting. Excellent choice, for sure. So what's next for you? You're obviously stacking up projects and knocking them out of the park here. Do you have another project you're working on now, or what are you working on that you're excited about?
I'm actually working on the kind of next phase of this work, which is to bring together all the things that I found out and the things I'm working on about Susanna. And so kind of my next step is going to be a book about Susanna, and not just her life, but the idea of the early modern woman's life. But I think it's time Susanna's story got told. So that's my current project up my sleeve.
Well, I know we will love to hear back from you when that project comes to fruition as well. Thank you so much, Ailsa Grant Ferguson, for being here today and sharing with us about this very exciting project about Halls, Croft, and Susanna Shakespeare. We look forward to seeing your book come to fruition, and we appreciate you being here to share this history with us.
Thanks, Cassidy. It's always lovely to see you.
If you would like more information on Ailsa Grant Ferguson's work and to see the resources that she recommends for you, including the clickable links to all of the projects we've been talking about today, then check out the show notes for today's episode. We have all of that listed for you there, so it's quite easy to go directly to the website and see and look around on Halls, Croft and all of the stuff that's there. Definitely check out Susanna's cabinet. You can find all of these things at CassidyCash.com/episode 365. While you're on this show notes page, in addition to exploring Halls, Croft, you can also see in-depth history content related to Susanna Shakespeare and the background of this property and their lives there. Things like primary documents, museum artifacts, and period paintings inside the detailed show notes. This is available for patrons of our show, and you can click on the detailed show notes button to either join us as a patron or log in if you're already a supporter, and all the extras will expand right there on the podcast homepage. That's, again, CassidyCash.com/episode 365. That's CassidyCash.com/EP365. That Shakespeare Life is researched and produced by me, Cassidy Cash. Our audio engineer is Gary Mayholm. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.